Today we have a very special guest joining us, Stuart Harshaw. Stuart is a seasoned mining executive with a successful international career with Vale and Inco. He is currently president and CEO of Nickel Creek Platinum, a mining exploration and development company advancing one of the world's largest undeveloped nickel copper sulfide and platinum group metal deposits in Canada. He is a member of the board of directors of several mining companies, as well as Laurentian University of Sudbury, Canada. Thanks again for joining us on The Rocks. If you like what you hear and want to catch past conversations, please be sure to subscribe. Now let's dive in. Welcome, Stuart, to On the Rocks. I'm excited to have you here today.
Oh, thanks, Emily. Always a good chance to have a drink.
That's right. And what are you drinking today?
I'm actually a peaty Scotch drinker. I know that it's a Lagavulin, got that peaty kind of taste to it, and I fell in love with it probably 10 years ago, and since then it's my go-to.
I never understood why people would want to drink something that tasted like peat until I had Lagavulin, and I was like, all right, I get it now. I had a partner and client that we would always pick up Scotch in the Dubai duty-free shop, and he would always get like the best Lagavulin that they had there, and that won me over. That's a really nice one.
It is definitely. Although, some of the bourbons, I do like bourbons. I'm not suggesting that I wouldn't, but this is my go-to.
The Scotch has a different, I don't know, it's like you want like a fireplace and fall weather for a Scotch, or at least I do.
It definitely. Well, it's British Isles, right? It's always it always feels like that, even in the summertime.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to have you on for this episode because I think this is the first time we've had somebody on to talk about nickel. There's a lot of discussion and interest in nickel, but I think a lot of folks really aren't very familiar with it. They probably read and hear about, copper, gold, silver. But tell us a little bit about nickel and, what it's used for, how it's mined, how it's different than other minerals in the space.
Sure. I mean, nickel is one of those ones that everybody thinks they know it because of the coin, right? So the nickel coin, everybody thinks, unfortunately, that's not made from nickel anymore. But the main use for nickel is stainless steel. So, appliances, stainless steel appliances, all this stuff in the kitchen that's stainless. You'll see a lot of, it represents about 73%, 72% of the use of nickel is in stainless and all the different forms of stainless. And so, there's in construction, there's all sorts of different areas where you would actually see the stainless. So it's the shiny steel is what I would define it as. The other main uses for it, plating. So when you're at your sink, that's nickel. So the taps and the shower heads are plated nickel normally. So it's plated with nickel and chrome and different products. The one place right now that everybody's talking about nickel and why it suddenly became important is, thanks to our friend Elon and his drive for the EV market and really shifting things. He said we need more nickel, the mines. And really that's just relating to the batteries. So the new projected demand and where nickel is going to be consumed, a lot of nickel is going to be consumed that wasn't consumed before is really with the battery side. And that could be both in the electric vehicles as well as in the storage. So a lot of the battery storage supporting wind turbines and solar panel type applications for energy. Anything that is storage has the potential for being a nickel battery.
Elon Musk specifically said he wanted nickel projects that were environmentally safe, right? I mean, he made a very specific call out, if I remember correctly.
The green revolution, there's all sorts of different names. You can every newspaper seems to have a different title for it, the green revolution. And given that the climate discussions going on in Scotland right now with G20, I can't remember which size of group it is there, but that conversation is really bringing it to the forefront and has been for the last 20 years, where we're trying to grapple with the amount of carbon and what it's doing to our climate and doing to our planet. And so the green revolution, a lot of that is hinging on this EV technology. So if you actually look at the different countries, a lot of their focus for becoming green is to electrify the automobile industry and to increase the amount of renewable energy sources. And a lot of that requires the key metals, the nickel, the copper, the cobalt. These are what we're calling the critical minerals, lithium. These are the ones that are all tied to this new focus. And really, that's what makes nickel such an exciting commodity, because it is at the forefront of the green, right? It's actually very much at the forefront.
Yeah, because even just the focus on renewable energy generation, I think what sometimes people forget is you have to be able to store all of that massive amount of energy, right? So even when you start to talk these big policy proposals, you can generate a ton of electricity through renewables, but it may not be stable, right? So you've got to be able to store it and deploy it when it's needed, which is heavily reliant on battery metals. And I know some of the coverage about the convention or the big summit this week in the mining press has been how little the policymakers and the politicians have talked about supporting the mining activity that will be required in order to deliver all of this technology, right? It's been like a huge gap. Nobody's saying anything about how we'll get all of this metal to do all of this.
When you're saying how is can you find the most environmentally friendly processes to get these metals? Because you don't want to get them at all cost. For the nickel world, you're looking at a substantial portion of the nickels coming out of Indonesia and feeding into that side of things. And it's very carbon concentrated, if you will. It's got a very high, mainly because a lot of the energy is coal based. So if you look at Indonesia in terms of what they produce their power with, it's a significant portion of it is coal based, especially as they add power on. It's the same in China. If you add kilowatt hours in China, it's coal. That's one of the biggest drivers for because of the inefficiencies of coal in terms of from a carbon production of energy. So I think the world is kind of starting to waken up to that and say it's not just nickel we need clean nickel. That's actually starting to resonate with the major mining companies. It's resonating with governments. It's resonating with the automotive companies. Any nickel isn't the best nickel. It's got to be nickel that's sourced with an ESG type approach to it, right? So
yeah, because we don't want to put all this effort into a low carbon future when then because of where you're mining or how you're mining, you do the complete opposite of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, right? Getting a project like yours in the Yukon, right? I mean, could be huge, a place where you can do it responsibly and in the right way.
absolutely. And I mean, that's the key is the mining jurisdictions that are in the North America, the European theaters, and some of the others in the world, Australia, for instance. They're ones where you actually have very stringent guidelines for consultation with local communities, all the way through to how are you sourcing energy, how are you developing your project in order to be the most environmentally friendly process you have, and that's across the board with all projects, which gives a lot more credence to the idea of a green metal when you're in these jurisdictions.
And are you starting to see interest from customers, like at that level? Like, at what point do companies that are going to buy the nickel start talking to the exploration and mining companies? I mean, it seems like they're starting to vertically integrate more than they have historically. Are you having those types of conversations or seeing them happen?
Yeah, no, those conversations are definitely occurring. And the reason they're occurring is that it's all around supply. People are concerned about ensuring we're getting supply. Like for the nickel, for instance, it's expected to double over the next 10 years. So the overall global supply needs to double over the next 10 years. And any commodity that you try to do that with, it's got its challenges. To do that in a safe, environmentally proper way is really critical to the industry. And so that doubling has meant that the automotive companies are definitely concerned about supply. And so to me, they're going to be looking at vertical integration, but that's not to say that they're going to operate mines. They just, you've seen Tesla announce, involvement with BHP in Australia, and that's the kind of agreements that will occur, I believe, going forward as people try to make sure they secure the metal for their production.
Are there any technical challenges with nickel projects that make that difficult in this space, or maybe that an investor should be aware of if they're thinking of investing in nickel projects?
Yeah, I guess the biggest technical issue out there, if you will, has been really the HPAL projects and the laterites. So laterite nickel is essentially oxidized nickel that's in dirt. I always say it's just think of it as dirt. So it's easy to mine because it's dirt. The difficulty is actually now getting it out of that dirt and into a pure metal state. And really, the high pressure acid leach technology has been the technology that has been attempted over the last 25 years with challenges of significant challenges where overruns on capital, difficulty starting up and maintaining productions at nameplates, and there's a lot of different challenges associated with that technology. To boot, that's the technology that has got the most carbon as well. It's a double whammy when you take a look at it. The supply needs to maybe be diversified into different processes. For me, the mine Nickel Creek has in the Yukon is a sulfide. And so the difference is that sulfide can be concentrated through a mill process, and then it's produced as a concentrate containing the metals that goes to a smelter, traditional nickel smelting technology, and refining. And that's a lower carbon footprint. And you're starting to get that carbon footprint being defined by the smelters and refineries. So the large players in that space are starting to define that because the world wants to know what is the carbon footprint of these metals. The sulfide nickel is a known technology. It's not an unknown technology, and it is now just a question of when, rather than when is the right time for these to develop.
People who maybe haven't been involved in the industry as an investor to a certain extent may not understand that there are different types of deposits, and the type of deposit that the company is working on or building a mine for or exploring at has a lot of impact on the economics and the operations and the environmental impact of that eventual operating mine, right? And understanding the different types of geology, that there aren't just, there's not just one kind of nickel mine. And it does require some research and some due diligence to understand what those technical terms mean to your investment in a lot of different ways.
It's like everybody that's in a business, you start using acronyms and you don't actually explain the basics because it's part of what you are. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, you get used to it. And then you forget that, some people just don't have a starting point. What is concentrate? So people, like I say the words concentrate and I'm visualizing it. But I mean, the thing to understand is how I would define mining is it's just an impurity removal process. So if you actually think of mining, you're starting in the ground and you're taking it out instead of the rock around it, and you're taking ore out. So the first thing you're doing is separating it on that level. Then you crush it and then you run it through a mill. And the mill essentially just floats off I would call the rock and some of the impurities, if you will, at that stage. Some of the waste rock at that point forms the product, which is now higher percentage of the desirable metals. Doesn't matter what commodity you're talking about. So for nickel, nickel tends to come with others, like if you're looking at the sulfides. So ours, for instance, has nickel, copper, cobalt, and PGMs. Some would only have nickel, some may only have copper. So these are the kind of things that you need to understand. How does every mine work? It's going to be different. It is going to be different from one to the next. Laterites are a completely different process. It's a completely different economic and metallurgical process to do it. So
yeah, because also those byproducts essentially can also be worth money, right? And can enhance the value of the project as well. So even though something's primarily a nickel project, I'm betting that you've got quite a bit of value in some of those other minerals associated with the nickel.
Absolutely. We're probably 45% of our value is other than nickel. So nickel probably is around 55%. There is other projects that are closer to the 90% is nickel. And what you get with that is to be honest with you, is a higher exposure to nickel And the challenge that you have is means in the downside of a cycle, because commodities are cyclic, right? So there's always the downside. The byproduct credits is what makes companies stay profitable. I spent like I said, 28 years with Inco and then Vale in the base metal side. Sudbury Basin ores have significant, which is very similar to what we have, which is nickel, copper, cobalt, PGM. So their ores are very similar to what we have. It's through those down cycles, it's the byproducts that actually keep you profitable, keep the lights on. I call it in the bad times, and in the good times, that's I call it a cash cow. And when things are really above, it's a cash cow. So that's great.
Yeah, because it adds some diversity essentially in the products, for lack of a better word, that you're selling, right? If you've got a diverse suite that you can be selling at different times. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Are there things that you would suggest that an investor look at closely when they're evaluating a nickel project?
Location. Every jurisdiction has its different challenges in terms of, if you will, in terms of bringing projects in. If you're in what I consider to be a mining jurisdiction where the entire infrastructure is there, got communities that accept mining as a value proposition and work with mining versus areas where mining's not as popular and therefore there's more resistance to mining. So those are some of the criteria that you need to look at from a jurisdiction area. And infrastructure. Spending money on roads is expensive. It's also difficult because now you're having to get all the environmental processes for just the road, let alone for the mine site. And so, working with First Nations, especially in Canada and in the US, it's very important to work with the local communities, to work with the local groups very strongly, and ensure that you have strong relationships in that side. So these are subtles. Like everybody, it's easy to look at the economic only and just say, "Oh, that's got this and that's going to produce that." But if it's not in the right place and if they don't have the agreement that they can actually move forward with the project, it doesn't matter what their economic model says. You know what I mean? Like it's not as critical. You need to look at the whole package together.
Yeah, because some of those things can kill a project. And I'm glad to hear you talk about collaboration with First Nations and really regular communication, I would imagine, with that community. And I'd be interested to hear kind of what your approach is with that partnership with your project. Are there specific things that you've talked about with the community that you're focused on?
Well, to me, it's always keeping them fully abreast of where you're at and where you're going and the timing. To me, it's like every community. It's about managing expectation. Mining is not you don't build a mine in a year. So from the concept, you know how it comes. If you find it can take anywhere from 5 to 20 years for projects to develop, depending on a whole combination of things, right? So it's about expectations, right? Because you don't want to go in promising the world when you know it's going to take 5 to 10 years, and that's a long time. Think about it. If you're in a community, that's a long time. Because if you're thinking, okay, my children are going to have jobs. If your children are 18, there's a question of when are they going to have. If your children are 2, there's a good chance that they're going to have jobs, right? You know what I mean? Like you have to put it in perspective, right? So making sure the expectations are there and just being totally upfront. Like to me, honesty is always incredibly important, and honesty includes regular conversations so that there isn't any misconceptions or things are allowed to get out of control because you're not aware of them, that type of thing. So to me, that you hit on it. It's regular, honest, and upfront conversations.
Yeah, no, I think with the jurisdictions I've worked in internationally, I think it's sometimes even more heightened, but it's always been amazingly clear to me the social license to operate is just as serious here in the US and Canada in all sorts of different ways as it is in other countries globally, right? I mean, you've got to have the local community supportive. That's so critical. What is it that got you into nickel?
I was in engineering in school, and I found myself in metallurgy. I had no idea. I had no one in my family that was in mining. I'd never been to a mine. I didn't know anything about mining when I was in school. So I kind of fell into metallurgy just from the science of it. And then my first job happened to be with Inco, and that was back in 1990. I just grew with the company. And so, very few people nowadays stay with companies. I was 28 years uh, with a company, right? So you don't see that now. So to me, that's how I ended up with Inco. And really my career moved through operations, corporate, different levels with obviously within the organization. But at no point did I feel bored or not enjoying what I was doing. And that's really the key to me, is that if you're engaged and always kind of moving forward within an area, why change? So nickel just got into my blood. That's how I would describe it. So when I left consulting and doing some board work, this opportunity at Nickel Creek came across, and I'm a bull on nickel. I believe this is the decade for nickel, and I wanted to be part of a project and part of something where I can bring value, and that's exactly what this kind of matched into me. So, perfect match for me.
Well, and tell me a little bit, and for the listeners, a little bit about the Nickel Creek project and kind of what phase you're at, because I know it's at a really exciting stage where you guys are right now.
Yeah, we're developing, right? We're at that stage where we're ready to kind of move forward with a PFS. We're ready to kind of move forward and be part of the development stage of our project. And at the same time, we're doing some more exploration on our land, and we hit what I love to see, which is massive nickel sulfide. And having come from the Sudbury Basin and used to seeing massive sulfide, it was really exciting to hit massive sulfide in the Yukon. So that was something that we did this summer, which was really exciting, and that will just add to the value of our project and the capability of our project to move forward. It feels like we're just starting to go. The industry wants us, the market wants us, and we've got 1.9 million pounds or billion pounds of nickel contained within it. It's a large, 25 plus year project, so it's pretty exciting to see the start, and I'm looking forward to bringing this online.
And could you explain for folks what it means that you hit a massive sulfide and why that's important?
You've got different types of sulfides, if you will, but for the most part, a nickel sulfide, or just let's call it a massive sulfide, just refers to a very high concentration of sulfur, nickel, and in our case would be copper as well, and cobalt, and we do have PGMs as well. And what the key is it's what I would consider to be a vein, a sheet, if you will, of nickel sulfide. And most mines of the high grade are designed around these massive sulfides. Why? Because it's concentrated. So where you're looking at anywhere from 2 to 4% nickel contained within these intersections, and that just means you get a lot more metal for the same amount of tons you move. That's the simple way of looking at it. So it's very economical to mine massive sulfide. So as long as you have enough of it, so it's really good to find nickel sulfide.
One thing people talk about when it comes to battery metals or battery minerals is, what if the technology changes?
And so the one thing about nickel is about range and the ability for vehicles to have the longer range. And that's only available with the high nickel batteries. There is going to be some technologies that shift that are non-nickel containing batteries. They will come into the market, but the market is growing at such an extreme that this is already factored into the doubling of nickel over the next 10 years is still factoring in that we have other battery technologies involved. The other thing to always remember also is that the stainless consumption isn't changing. It grows year on year, anywhere from, let's just say 1 to 3%, depending on the year. It's constantly growing. The reason for that is as countries shift in their economic models, like China, where you have a bigger middle class, what that actually means is more consumption of stainless. And so stainless per capita goes up as you grow along that. And that's what's happening. The key to the future for nickel is actually having the right projects in the go at this juncture, so that you do have this long-term supply. Long-term supply is critical to the industry. You need to ensure that the automotive companies, everybody can get their nickel. It's when you don't have enough nickel that there's a problem.
Well, because they start looking for substitutes, right? Or looking for technologies that can get around it if they can't get regular enduring access to it. While everybody is hearing about nickel now because of electric vehicles and batteries, it's the not so sexy demand, right? The stainless that keeps it on that nice steady growth, even if there are fluctuations. And I think that's such a huge trend in the industry for metal consumption in general. As these emerging and frontier markets start to come up in terms of, like you said, building out the middle class, there's so much more consumption of consumer goods, construction of infrastructure, transportation. I mean, all of that drives metal demand, right, across the board. I mean, that development in those countries is really, really good for the industry as a whole.
Oh, absolutely. And then copper is the other one, of course, right? And it gets a lot more airtime than nickel for the most part, but it's critical to all of these growth projects as well. So.
To close out our discussion, I've been asking all of our recent guests if you could wave a magic wand and change or improve or innovate one part of the mining industry, what would it be and why?
Safety. If I could wave the wand, it would be to have processes in place that makes all of the mines globally safe. You've seen the fatalities that occur, globally, the injuries that occur, and when you see things firsthand with people, it's real. Safety is something that cannot be underestimated in terms of its impact on the community, on the people around you, and it has to be the first commitment. So if you can wave the wand, it's to have the technologies in place to eliminate fatalities through the mining industry now.
Yeah, and at all different sizes, I think, of operating mines too. I mean, certainly there's a lot that could be done on the smaller, more localized level, right, to bring in some of the best practices that have been developed in other areas to keep people safe. Because a lot of companies are doing a great job, but like you said, it's just not across the board, right?
That's the wand part. Like, I mean, I know the focus is there definitely with the majors and a lot of the bigger type companies, but the smaller ones, especially in different jurisdictions in the world, that's the place where we really need to work on, because that's that's a key one. I would say the other one's environmental, of course. I mean, I'd love to wave the wand and make sure that there's literally no issues at any of these other mining, because that we have good in North America, we have very stringent rules and associated with it, but that's not true everywhere in the world. And it would be great to see the same level of care for our environment be maintained everywhere, no matter where you are in the world.
Those two goals really go so well together, right? I mean, environmental compliance and safety, along with personnel safety, and having jurisdictions have the right processes and the kind of follow through and the resources to enforce, right, is so critical, because it affects the whole industry when something happens at one site.
Like everybody, it affects, remember the Chilean miners that got trapped underground. And it is something that is a big focus, a bit, within our new world of, news travels very fast and very broadly. It's very important.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the discipline on both of those, the environmental protection and the safety, implementing that discipline at any mine site improves the operations of the site as well as the company as well, right? And it's something that, again, investors should really look at. If they're going to invest in a project, is this a project where folks are keeping the community around them, the environment, and their employees safe and protected, is a really important thing to be looking at very closely. And that will help, I think, with the magic wand. When the money cares, all of a sudden people start to align with those values.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess for me, it would be great if we had a process to make sure that, other areas did as well. And maybe it is the investors have a choice. Investors have a choice of where they invest, but also people have a choice where they source their products from. And if the products aren't sourced, we can take a look at what happened in Africa with the blood diamonds and the other things that have occurred, where people actually made a decision and said, no, we are not going to take these products from these places, and that helps, right? I mean, and that may be the process to get there, but that's what we need.
Absolutely. Well, cheers to that. And thanks so much for coming on the rocks and talking about nickel and a lot of other really timely topics with everything going on in the world.
Great. Well, thank you, Emily. That was fantastic.
Thank you to our guest and my colleague, Stuart Harshaw, for joining us on this episode of On the Rocks. To To learn more about Stuart, visit him on LinkedIn and Twitter at Nickel Creek Platinum. For more insights on new mining projects, mining news, and more, go to our website at www.prospectorportal.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Nugget. Thanks for joining us on The Rocks. If you enjoyed the episode, click the subscribe button and leave us a review. Until next time, keep your glasses full and your ice cold. Cheers.